Good morning, Chasm listeners. This is Ryan Rothstein, the Wildlife Habitat Specialist with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District, and this is your weekly conservation report. I'm sure most of you by now have been out ice fishing a few times. All the snow has definitely made travel difficult on a lot of lakes, but we've still got a little over a month left of the walleye and northern pike season, and of course panfish is open year-round. But a lot of reports of really difficult travel right now with the amount of snow and slush on the ice, but several lakes around the county have roads plowed out towards major destination spots. And at this point, most lakes are reporting over 12 inches of ice, but again, always make sure you're checking the ice before you get out on the lake for the first time each year. It's not worth dunking the truck in the ice or in the lake, and it's definitely not worth risking your safety at all. From reports that we've been hearing, it sounds like panfish have been suspended in basins deeper than 20 feet in a lot of areas, or there's also some folks that are catching them in around 10 feet of water in any areas that still have vegetation left over from last fall. But it sounds like bites have been pretty good overall, so hopefully you can all have a chance to get out again if you haven't already and get some panfish in the bucket and back home and in the frying pan. It's also been an interesting year with this winter, the amount of snow we've had so far. We are almost at an entire winter's total for snow, and we're only in mid-January here. But the rain this week has also made some interesting conditions across the state, and it has the potential to be a pretty difficult winter for wildlife coming up here. I know most of my deer around my area in the central part of the county have all shed their antlers already, and I'm hearing a lot of reports from folks elsewhere that a lot of bucks have dropped antlers already. So I thought I'd go over some tips to try to find some sheds, even though it's tough right now with the amount of snow. Hopefully we'll get a thaw sometime in the next month or so, and that we can all get out there and start looking for antlers. But what I try to do is keep running trail cameras after deer season closes, just so that I know roughly when most of the bucks in my area have shed their antlers. Sometimes you can run the risk of going too early while the deer are still carrying their antlers, and you may have just spooked them off your property and onto a neighbor's, where they'll then drop their antlers, so you won't find them for sure then. I also try not to wait too late if I can help it, just so that the rodents don't get to them. So running cameras has been a real key just to determine when the antlers are hitting the ground. Once the antlers are on the ground and I start looking full time, that's when I start to target areas like bedding areas. Look for sign, look for beds. If you know where deer are bedding, start in those areas, and then focus on bedding areas, feeding areas, any food plots, standing crops, any places of good browse, and then focus on the areas in between those two. Typically this time of year, the deer are just going to be moving between bedding and feeding. So with their travel being limited, these are the first places I like to look. Some other spots that I like to focus on are south-facing slopes. A lot of times deer will bed on these just because they get a lot more of the sun and are a little warmer this time of year. Otherwise, conifer plantings in Stearns County have been really good for sheds just because they provide such great thermal cover. They cut the wind way down, and the snow tends to be quite a bit shallower under these conifer plantings than out in the open or in hardwoods. And another place I like to look is along fence lines, because each time that deer has to jump that fence, it's pretty jarring when they hit the ground again, and that's sometimes enough to just knock the antler loose. Another thing that's always been a good tip that I try to keep in mind is taking your time and being thorough. It's not a race. You're going to find more sheds by walking slower than walking faster. And if you have a dog that's a good hunting dog, a lot of times they can be trained to find antlers too. So sometimes it can pay to bring the dog along. You might pick up a few more sheds than you would have otherwise. And as I mentioned, we're shaping up to be a pretty hard winter for wildlife here. That rain this week is creating a pretty thick crust, so it's going to be tough for pheasants and turkeys and deer. In terms of deer, it can be helpful this time of year if you're going to plan to cut wood anyway, it's really helpful to start doing that now, because you're going to be dropping those treetops that are crucial for deer to survive when they browse those treetops. What I try to do is focus on species like aspen or popple, maple and basswood, and these can all provide good browse and, about the best food deer can have right now. And if you are going to be out cutting wood, always make sure you use proper chainsaw safety equipment. Make sure you're wearing a helmet, chainsaw chaps, and always use ear and eye protection. But speaking of forestry-based stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit here about woodland stewardship plans. And if you're a landowner that owns more than 20 acres of woods, I think it's something that would be good to consider. And if you don't know what a woodland stewardship plan is, they are plans that are written by professional foresters. And essentially it creates a baseline report of what you have in the woods. So what are your woods made of? Which tree species do you have? What's the rough timber estimates? What are the different cover types out there? And it gives you then a suite of guidelines to help you reach whatever your management goals may be. So it's a great starting point to tell you what you've got out there and then tell you this is where you are now and this is where you can go. And these plans are designed to cover a 10-year period. And they're just a great option for landowners that have at least 20 acres of woods, because it'll give you a rough idea of what's actually out there and what you could do depending on what your goals are for that woods to get there. So that's about all I've got for you this week. We're still located here at Marketplace Mall in Waite Park next to Pizza Ranch. Office is open if you ever have wildlife or outdoorsy type questions. I know my coworker Jason Selvog and I love to talk wildlife stuff with landowners, so you can stop in during business hours or you can always give us a call. Our main line is 320-251-7800, extension 3. And this has been your conservation report, and I am Ryan Rothstein, Wildlife Habitat Specialist with Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District. Have a great weekend, everyone.